being recorded and being broadcast live on YouTube. So usual protocol, please, members, if you wish to speak, can you speak into your mics so that the many people who are watching us remotely can hear what you've got to say. We'll move on to the agenda then in the business for this evening. Part one is licensing. Item 1 is apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Stephen Sweeney, Councillor Simon White, and they are being substituted by Councillor Hutchinson and Councillor Burnett Faulkner this evening. Thank you. Got that right. I've also received apologies from Councillor Ian Wilkes. Take it there are no more apologies since everybody else is present. So we'll move to item 2, which is declarations of interest in relation to licensing matters. Do any members have any declarations of interest in regards of licensing? No. Okay, moving to item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes for this previous meeting can be found on pages 5 to 10 of your agenda. Can we agree that they are received as a correct record? Okay, item 4 is the minutes of the licensing subcommittee meeting. The minutes for this meeting can be found on pages 11 to 12 of the agenda. Same again, can we take these as a record of being read? Okay, that concludes licensing. We will now move on to public protection. So item 5, declarations of interest in relation to public protection matters. Any members have any declarations of interest? That's good. Item 6 is the first item of business this evening, which is the Food Safety Service Plan 2023-24 and Review of Performance 2022-23. This report can be found on pages 13 to 32 of your agenda. I would like now to invite our officer, Nesta, if she would present this report to us this evening.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the food safety plan is attached in the appendix to the report, and this plan provides details on the previous performance and actions and the proposed work activities for the current year. So in relation to food safety, the current priorities of the team are ensuring that food and drink intended for sale for human consumption is produced, manufactured, stored, distributed and handled safely and in hygienic conditions. We also have a duty to investigate complaints about food and food premises, respond to food alerts and controls to prevent infectious disease and food poisoning. So in relation to the report, I'm just going to take you through some of the tables and some of the highlights. I'm going to jump forward in terms of to section 2.4 in terms of the demands on the food service. So that's on page 7 of the report. So this table shows the number of food premises for each of the categories A to E, which is a risk rating given to the premises based on the previous visit or inspection undertaken. And that can be based on the type of premises, the quantity of food produced, the compliance, and whether they have higher risk processes or vulnerable people in terms of who they're serving. And the inspection regime ranges from an inspection every 6 months at a category A to 3 years at category E. And there's a table that explains each of those bands below. I think, as you can see, throughout the years, those numbers remain relatively constant. Last year, we had a total of 1,025 registered food premises within the borough. So I'm going to move forward in terms of to section 3. And this tells you then in terms of the inspections due each year. So I think that's based on the same inspection regime between the A to the E premises. And you can see there that in 23-24, there's 380 premises due. If you move down slightly, there's another table which shows the number of service or inspections completed in 22-23 last year. And we actually completed 587 inspections. And you'll note that there were actually in that year about just shy of 400 due, but we inspected more. That was due to the carryover for uninspected premises, the legacy of COVID in essence, that we had some catching up in terms of some of those inspections to do. So we did do quite a high number of inspections last year. In addition to that, last year, we also received 113 new food premises registrations. So that's 113 new food businesses within the borough. And each of those are required to have an inspection within 28 days of registering with ourselves. That's the regime in terms of how we determine the inspection programmes and how we do it. What you will also see is the National Food Hygiene Ratings Scheme, which is the stickers that you see when you go into restaurants or food establishments. So they work on a basis of giving a rating between 5 and 0. Now, this works the opposite way round, in that if you have a rating of 5, you're considered to be very, very good, whereas if you have a rating of 0, there's urgent improvement necessary. In relation to those, this is a snapshot because these figures vary week on week, but on the 1st of April, we had 867 premises within the scheme, and of those, 757 were very good, and we didn't have any which were rated 0, needing urgent improvement. So, the report goes on to give you some figures in terms of other activities, in terms of food complaints and complaints about hygiene of premises. That table starts on page 10, and as you can see, the numbers are higher than the previous 2 years, again because of COVID, but they haven't returned to a level equivalent to what it was in pre-pandemic levels. So we investigated 50 complaints about food and 67 investigations with regard to hygiene at food premises last year. I think in terms of highlights, I'd just then like to jump towards the end of the report, where it details the performance indicators that are also included within the Cabinet report. So each quarter we look at performance, and we choose 2 performance indicators that are reported. And that is the percentage of premises that have a 0 or 1 rated in terms of the food hygiene rating. And that is currently, or for last year, was at 0.4%. And also that our A and B premises, those are the very high risk premises, are also inspected on time. So they're the ones that need inspecting either every 6 months or every 12 months. And throughout last year, we achieved 100% of those. So I think those are the main highlights in terms of the reports. I'm very happy to take any further comments that you or questions that you do have in relation to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nesta. Any members wish to raise any comments, questions on this? Councillor Hutchinson.
I'd just like to thank you for a very, very detailed report. In section 6.1, you mentioned the percentage of category and category B food business inspections completed on time was 100%. I recall this was reported to Cabinet on Tuesday, the 6th of June, 2023. The One Council programme shows there was no change in the trend, meaning it was also 100% the previous time that this was reported to Cabinet. In fact, looking over the last year, it's been consistently 100%. So with your permission, Chair, I ask that the committee pass on a very well done to the Newcastle Borough Food Hygiene Inspection Team in achieving 100% of inspections over the last year on time. Now, if I can ask a question, if I may. You mentioned in section 6.1 on page 10 of the report that there was 1 premise with the number 1 rating and 0 premises with the 0 rating. The one premise has caused us to have the 0.4% score. I'm pleased to read a 1 or a 0 score would result in enhanced business support visits and revisits. Every business should be given the chance to turn things around. But is this premises with the 1 rating still trading? And is this business anything that this committee should be worried about? Thank you.
In terms of the food hygiene rating scores, they're a publicly available report, so anybody can see where those are. As I say, they do change week on week because we do uploads each week to the Food Standards Agency. So there's a website where you can have a look at those, so you can see where the actual individual premises is. So there's a website available. I'll tell you what that is. So it's ratings.food.gov.uk, and you can see all the ratings within the borough, so you can see any updates that there are in relation to those. In relation to that particular premises, as far as I'm aware, they are still trading. Obviously, we work with those businesses where they need improvement. Some of those improvements aren't necessarily due to hygiene. Sometimes it can be due to paperwork and management systems. So they will have received revisits, they will have received information and time to improve that situation. Alternatively, we have the equally, if we need to, we can take enforcement action. So we have the two strings. We can help and support and advise equally, depending on the seriousness and the nature of the actual problems that we find in the premises. We could equally take enforcement action.
Thank you, Nesta. Councillor Worthing?
Because I haven't looked in the right place, but I couldn't find it. The category ratings that you have 0 to 5, are the various premises obliged to display them? Is it mandatory, optional? Would it be advisable for it to be mandatory, or is that a bridge too far?
In relation to them, they're stickers. They are issued to all the premises, and the results are always available on the website. However, it isn't mandatory to display in England at this moment in time. It's something that a lot of environmental health or regulatory services are lobbying the Food Standards Agency and the government to do, because people see these and the best thing would be to actually be able to display them. But it's not mandatory to display. However, that doesn't negate the fact that they are always on the website for people to find that information.
Thank you very much. Could I also second what Councillor Hutchison said? Fabulous report, very readable. Thorough.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the detailed report. Thank the officers very much. Really quite comprehensive report. But the point I want to make on page 26 or page 10 of the report, food complaints. Can you give more? You mentioned the COVID, after the COVID or whatever. Can you give us a little bit more detail, please? Yeah, the figures have shot up on page 26 of the main report, page 10 on your report. At the right at the very bottom.
Okay then. So in relation to those food complaints, so that will be about the quality of the food, or that there's something not right about the food. So people have that choice as to whether or not they complain. It's a very uncontrollable thing that we can do. So that may be that people think that the quality of it isn't right, the fitness of that food isn't correct. And obviously that has gone up. It was about an equivalent level in 1920. Things went down during COVID and it's returned to that sort of level. The other side of the column, in terms of the hygiene of the food premises, that's where somebody has visited a premises and therefore considers there's an issue with the hygiene, either the practices that they've seen people undertake when they've been preparing the food, serving the food, or the condition of the premises has resulted in the complaint. So one is about the actual food that they've received and the other one is about the hygiene of the premises. And that's the one that hasn't returned to the pre-pandemic levels. We were around 250 at the height of our complaints in 1920, and we're about 67 last year.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question really about hygiene, in the sense of where you complain, as it's, I'm not going to say the food that you've had is bad. Do you complain to the premises, or complaints coming into yourselves?
People can obviously do either, and some people will complain directly to the food establishment, and they will deal with that complaint as they see fit. Other times, you know, customers feel that, you know, either what they have had is significant and, you know, want to have that independently investigated, and they will make that complaint to us. They can do that online. We can receive those and we'll follow each of those up.
To raise any thoughts? No. Okay. Having listened to what people have said, are members happy to receive and endorse the food safety plan for the next 12 months? Okay, I'll say that's clearly carried. Okay, moving on to item 7, which is the updates on results of taxi licensing appeals. This report can be found on pages 33 to 36 of the agenda. I'll hand back over to Nesta, who will present this report.
Many thanks, Chair. So this report is to update members on the taxi appeals that have gone to court following the council's decision to either suspend, revoke or refuse to grant either a taxi or a vehicle licence. So there's been a couple of cases. One of those has been in the Magistrates' Court. This is where the council granted a licence with conditions that the driver needed to pass the knowledge test. The driver appealed, and one of the case hearings was deferred due to needing an interpreter. The next hearing was due on the 23rd of May, and it was heard and dismissed, and the council was awarded £2,000 costs. There's also been 3 Crown Court cases. Case 1 and 2 relate to the same driver. So one in relation to the driver and one in relation to the vehicle. Both of these were withdrawn before the hearing. So the Magistrates' Court costs of £2,422 come into effect and were awarded to the council. The third of the Crown Court cases was a refusal to grant a driver licence due to conduct and behaviour, and that was also withdrawn prior to. So therefore, the cost of £1,000 came into effect of the council. It's also worth noting that we currently have 7 outstanding magistrates' appeal cases. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Nesta. It's becoming a bit of a trend, these licensing committee meetings now, when we get to hear the taxi results, and we are doing ourselves quite proud, and I commend all members and officers for what they are achieving. Any other members wish to raise any points? Councillor John Williams.
What you just said, Chair, just a little point on 2.4 on page 33. There's actually seven, read it right. Seven outstanding appeals. That seems rather a lot. Is any reason for that, or is the remarks of the results of the subcommittees?
Obviously, Councillor Williams, any decision that any driver or applicant receives at a subcommittee has the right of appeal. Or unfortunately, in those cases, those drivers have decided to exercise their right for appeal. It is relatively high. There's equally some of those, you know, that sometimes they do take quite a lot of time. I think we've reported in the past that some of these take a lot of time. And, you know, unfortunately, the number is the number at this moment in time. We could do some further analysis and see if there are any trends in terms of those decisions, but off the top of my head, there isn't anything that I could add in relation to that number.
Thanks.
Just something I've noticed, if it helps to answer the question, is that it seems that a lot of taxi drivers appeal because they can then continue trading, and that's why so many of them have been withdrawn prior to going to court. That's just my opinion from sitting in the committee.
That is entirely true. However, the appeal process does cost quite significantly in terms of financial implications for that application. So they have to be quite committed in relation to that. But I do take your point that yes, they can on some occasions enable them to continue to drive or use the vehicle pending the outcome of the appeal.
Thank you, Chair. Nesta, can I just ask on 2.2, the ones that withdrew, the costs go to them, they pay the costs, the individual.
They do indeed.
Thank you.
Just a question? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Brown.
Just following up from Councillor Diamond's question, what happens in the situation where they've appealed and they have to pay the cost, but they have no money? Does it take a long period of time for them to repay? And if so, how does that work in relation to legal aid, etc.?
My understanding is that that's a matter for the court to decide with them if they have a payment plan or something. The court is the debt is initially to the court, so they pay it that way first of all.
So it could be that it takes quite a long time for the council to recoup the money.
On occasion, yes.
Thank you for clarifying.
No further questions or comments. We will move. Our members happy to approve the recommendations and note the content of this report. Yes, clearly carried. Item 8 is the proposed changes to fixed penalty notices, or FPNs. This report can be found on pages 37 to 42. I will hand over to our officer who will present this report. Michelle, if you could like to read your report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Okay, so the report today is to inform members of the proposals to review the fixed penalties for Section 34, which is in regards to duty of care of the Environmental Protection Act, and Section 33 of the Environmental Protection Act, which relates to fly tipping. And we're also looking to seek the approval of these proposals. We're also informing members of the proposal to implement the use of Section 46A of the Environmental Protection Act. And this is in relation to what you would know as bins on streets. And we're also looking to seek your approval in regards to implementing and utilising this power. So the reasons for today, bringing forward the report, we're looking to review the current fixed penalties in regards to these pieces of legislation to ensure that failure to comply with these is a deterrent to those who choose not to comply with the law. And we're hoping to also implement the use of the Section 46A, aka bins on streets, as we'll say, to deal with long-standing issues of bins being left out for long periods of time. This will coincide with a policy that will be drawn up in regards to how that will play out in procedural and with officers, which will obviously link in with our enforcement policy. So if we'll take you through a bit of background, and obviously I'm conscious that this is when we're speaking here around legislation, so I'm trying not go through the jargon or anything like that and try and simplify it so it's clear for everybody present in the committee today, and obviously anybody who's joining us online. So the local authority have long been utilising powers under Section 34 of the Environmental Protection Act. And that's to ensure that people understand the importance of their duty of care obligations when it comes to the disposal of their waste. Section 34 requires all occupiers of domestic properties to take reasonable measures to ensure that waste produced on their property is only transferred to an authorised person. So an authorised person includes the local authority, who provide a normal waste collection service. It can be somebody who has a valid registration as a carrier, a broker or dealer of waste, or an operator of a waste transfer site who have a valid environmental permit or registration. So the reasonable measures that are on domestic householders is to ask a person or a company who are taking away the waste, whether they're a registered carrier, to ask to see a copy of their certificate to show that they are an authorised trader, to make a note of the registration number and take a copy of a photograph or anything like that, to take a note in the name of the collector and the details of the vehicle, to ask for a receipt, which should obviously have all details of that business on there, and to also check the details with the Environment Agency. So the current fixed penalty for the duty of care, which is Section 34, is currently agreed in our fees and charges for the 22-23, and this is split down as follows. So for a household waste duty of care fixed penalty notice, if someone is found guilty of not complying with that notice and not complying with their duty of care, if they paid within 14 days, the fixed penalty would be £200. If they paid within 10 days, it would then be reduced to £120. So a scoping exercise has been completed with a number of other local authorities to understand how fixed penalties are used in different authorities and to allow us to streamline our own methods of enforcement in line with others. Fixed penalties for this particular section are ranged in authorities from £400 to a minimum of 120, and that's in accordance and in guidance with the scale of in regards to the legislation. The recommended penalty is 200, which is what we currently have, with a reduction to 120. But due to an increase in problems in Stoke-on-Trent, the City Council have adopted the upper end of this penalty. And we are therefore proposing a review on the current fixed penalty limits and proposing for this to be increased to £400, with a reduction to £350 if paid within 10 days. And that's to align with the process that Stoke-on-Trent are currently adopting. Moving on to fly tipping. So fly tipping, I'm sure you're all well aware, is defined as an illegal deposit of waste on land that does not have a licence to accept it. Uncontrolled illegal waste disposal can be hazardous to the public, especially if it contains toxic material or asbestos. In 2016-17, more than 1 million incidences of fly tipping were dealt with by councils across England, and an estimated clean-up cost of 58 million. So it's a very much a burden on our society. In 2019, the government introduced new fixed penalties for fly tipping, which could result in a penalty of up to £400 on somebody found guilty of fly tipping. This fixed penalty, which is known as Section 33 ZA, is currently set in our fees and charges for the 22-23 year as £400, with a reduction to £350 if paid within 10 days. It's also worth noting that earlier this year, in January 2023, as part of the government proposals on new antisocial behaviour action plan, which I've attached as an appendix to this document, the government is currently looking at upping these fixed penalties for fly tipping and are currently looking around the £1,000 mark. And that's in relation to fly tipping and increases to 500 for littering and graffiti offences. It's also been encouraged that an invoice should be issued for the removal of waste where evidence is present on top of the fixed penalties. And we're waiting for further government information in regards to the timescales for these to be implemented. A bit of background around the fly tipping. So we see an increase year on year with fly tipping. So in 21-22, we had 740 incidents reported of fly tipping. This is in Newcastle. And in 22-23, we had 775. So what we're looking to do is we're going to update the policy for fly tipping. We've done quite an extensive piece of work with interdepartmentals to make sure we can streamline the approach and the service we're providing for our customers. With a suggestion of issuing an invoice for the removal of fly tipping. So should somebody be found guilty of fly tipping, not only will they be served a fixed penalty, but we will also serve them an invoice, which will recoup our costs for the cleansing of that fly tipping. So in regards to this, what we're looking to do is, at the moment, in this fees and charges, we've got it to set it at 400 with a reduction to 350. What we are looking to do in line with Stoke-on-Trent is to set it at 400 with no reduction. Obviously, we have to bear in mind that the government at any point could consider increasing that as part of their proposals. And this is something we'll be monitoring alongside this. And if they decide to up this to £1,000, obviously that's quite a big difference. And obviously we will report back in regards to those proposals. Moving on to section 46A. This relates to residents who fail to comply with wheel bin and recycling schemes. And it's a notice that has instructions on how to store, dispose and present waste for collection. The failure to comply with this notice can result in a fixed penalty of £60. So Stoke-on-Trent City Council and Cheshire East Council currently have policies in place to assist with dealing with this matter in relation to poor domestic waste management. We're looking to replicate this response in order to address problems in hotspot locations throughout the borough. The enforcement process we are proposing would require officers to notify residents that a problem has been identified and provide opportunities for those residents to explain the circumstances and ask for support. We will only issue fixed penalties for persistent cases where a resident refuses to manage their waste properly. And by adopting this method, we're hoping to tackle problems that have been persistent in some of your areas for quite some time. We're going to go through a bit of evidence in regards to these proposals. So fly tipping, as I've mentioned before, continues to increase on an annual basis. The government are looking to review, and obviously as a review of that, it shows how important and how seriously fly tipping is being taken by government in regards to their proposals to increase the fixed penalties. Issues in relation to waste are continuing to make headlines, with some neighbouring authorities now adopting the Section 46, which is bins on streets. There will be a period of monitoring in regards to this introduction, and to make sure obviously it's being used correctly and proportionately. A policy will be put in place to ensure that there's a clear process, and we'll work closely with members to ensure that this message is pushed out to residents and ensure that a clear communication package also accompanies this introduction. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Indeed you are, I'm sure. Okay, I will open it up to members before I will ask a question. Do any members wish to come in? Okay, we'll start with Councillor Brown, Councillor Adcock, and then back to Councillor Whelan. Councillor Brown, please.
I just want to say a really big thank you, Michelle, for this. This is an issue, particularly the Section 46, that residents in Silverdale have been campaigning with me on since my election. In fact, I've had several correspondence with Andrew Bird and with Roger Tate on this, and also followed closely the approach Stoke was taking as reported in the Sentinel. So I just want to say on behalf of my residents, a big thank you for this. It really is welcome.
Thank you.
Councillor Adcock, I'm sure you're going to echo your colleague. And
absolutely, I do second my colleague. It's certainly fly tipping is becoming increasingly an issue, as you said in your report, and thank you for that very detailed report. I think it is right that the fine does need to match the increase in the crime. My question is about in Silverdale, we get rag and bone man come every week. So people are starting to leave, household appliances out on the streets because they know it'll be collected. Those residents, will they be subject to fines if this is a persistent issue going on, or because it's usually collected in a couple of days, would that not be subject to a fine?
Yes, thank you for that. So I think it's fair to say that in regards to this introduction, there is quite a substantial education package that we need to put out to residents to really emphasize to them what we expect as a borough council, what we will tolerate, what we won't tolerate. And also to really emphasize, putting waste out for, the rag and bone man who come out, people that come out regularly. Is that the right way to dispose of your waste? Do you know where that's ending up? Are you actually complying with your duty of care in regards to that? So it's really, we really do need to, educate our communities, our residents around the correct way to dispose of waste. And there are, registered traders who will come and remove said items from properties. And obviously quite conscious that there's a lot of unauthorised people that have also undertaken that sort of work as well. And there's a bit of work we need to do around that separately.
Yeah, I fully agree, because I don't think our residents are aware of, where this waste can end up, because obviously some of it's taken and then probably disposed of in various ways. So I think you're right about the education for people is very important, because I'm not sure people are aware of the implications of handing this over to rag and bone men, especially when there are ways of disposing of it and recycling it properly. Thank you.
Thanks. I think it's an excellent idea to make sure that we're in line with both Cheshire and Stoke-on-Trent. Otherwise, we become the saviour ground of the cheaper dumping for people. So if everyone's the same across the board, they've no place to hide. We're not the cheaper option. So I think that's an important thing, pending government changes. As far as the rag and bone men are concerned, all that they're interested in is metal, really. that's the be all and end all. And I did have cause to talk to a neighbour who'd had her garage. She's about 105. She had her garage done out by this ne'er-do-well who charged her far too much and dumped it on the grass verge. And I just said, you know, that's your responsibility. And she said, oh, it's all right. The rag and bone man will be around to collect. I said, he only wants metal. And she was horrified. And it disappeared when I told her there was a fine of up to £400. It disappeared overnight. Don't know where it went. Don't care. It went. But the education thing, I think, is so important, not just of householders, but until I went we had a jolly day out with Councillor Hutchinson and Councillor Adcock and so on. We went to the recycling plant. I had no idea how key it was and what vast sums of money we save our citizens by requiring the separation of cardboard from glass and all the other things, and the metal, the aluminium cans. And it's probably the education of the children in the schools as well would be incredibly helpful, because they will educate their parents. Just a thought.
Yes, absolutely. We already undertake quite an extensive environmental enforcement education program with schools. We go into schools to talk to them about littering, the impact that has on the environment, the importance of recycling, and hopefully for them to do the exact same thing, you know, go home and tell mummy and daddy off for not putting that glass bottle in the recycling bin. And it's an ongoing thing. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's changing an attitude that society has allowed to become acceptable, and we need to change that attitude to make it not acceptable and make people really think about how they are disposing of their waste.
Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you could ask the officer to go through the practicalities of getting people to remove the bins from the footway. I mean, there isn't many in Cross Heath who I represent, but as you come into the town, a lot of the terraced streets, you can't walk on the footpath because cars are parked really, it's a narrow footpath and you can't get around the bins. So what you're hoping to achieve, well, not what you're hoping to achieve, what the practicalities of, and well, actually, what do you want to achieve at the point? And also, will you be leafleting all of the properties in the borough to explain this particular item?
Yes, thank you for that. So obviously, for priority, we were going to look at hotspot locations for this particular method initially. That will include, you know, some information leaflets that go out, and we may ask members to assist with that as well. It's a good public communication tool for you to interact with your residents at that point, and to open those conversations around, do you know about your duty of care and that sort of thing. In regards to what we are hoping to achieve, so there's a couple of things. We're going to be creating a policy for this and how this power is going to be used by officers of the Borough Council. And obviously we need to take a careful approach in regards to this. I am aware that obviously we get quite a substantial number of reports in regards to bins being left out, or untidy gardens, that sort of thing. That don't necessarily mean that someone's doing this on purpose. It could be that they're vulnerable, unable to do it, requires support. And we need to obviously make sure that we are utilising the vulnerability hub in regards to that, and training our officers to make sure that those referrals, if we identify are needed, are being put in place. I'm also conscious that in a lot of these areas that we're talking about, we have collection points that are used by residents. Their bins are left at said collection points, and then obviously we get this issue of accumulations of waste that present at the collection points as well. So again, there's going to be a lot of educational resource that needs to go in this initially. Educating the residents as to what we expect of the Borough Council, what we will tolerate, and progressing this as a phased approach, really, issuing warnings initially, moving on to the issuing a notice, which is a section 46. And it's only when they breach that notice, then we will serve the fixed penalty. So if you look at it like that, they'll be educated first, they'll be given a warning. That will follow with an official notice that they need to comply with. And then a breach of that notice would then be a fixed penalty. So they would have quite a substantial number of opportunities to, mitigate, raise any concerns that we need to be aware of. And we're there to work with residents and I think a lot of the problems are around residents not knowing what we expect of them and what is acceptable. And I think once we do a lot of work and invest some time around that, we will start seeing a difference across the whole of the borough.
We're expected to see clear footpaths, footways, when the lads have come out and collected the waste. Within so many hours, they expected the bins to be put back in place. Now, I'm thinking private alleyways, how do we stand? Because it's private land. Can we go in and you make sure that the bins are taken back off that alleyway, or is it that'll be down to the residents?
So the private alleyways, as you're aware, are somewhat tricky to deal with. I think what we'll need to do is review what's happening in those alleyways. A lot of the time we have problems with fly tipping in those alleyways as well. We have problems with abandoned bins. And there's a bit of work that we need to do around looking at what action we need to do to stop that behaviour from happening and making it acceptable. A lot of residents aren't aware that the alleyways, while we say they're private, are actually their responsibilities. And again, there's a bit of education that needs to coincide with that. If this is outside your property, it's still on your property, it's in the alleyway, but it's still your responsibility. And I know that there's been a number of residents in streets that have been really proactive around clearing the private alleyways, and really building up a bit of resilience from all their neighbours around, making it a nice area for them to live and utilising it for the space that it was supposed to be utilised for, and not having it as this accumulation of waste, an area of fly tipping, an area where people just dump whatever they want. And there's a lot of work we need to do around that.
Could I just flip the coin? We spoke about bins left out after collection. I could take you to quite a number of properties who put the bins out and the recycling a good 2 days before bin collection. So I'm sure some of you have seen that. But so how do we stand on that? If we going to charge them for not taking the bins in, how do we address putting your bins out? And I've got several in the little cul-de-sac I live. I could take you now, not to get them into trouble, but it is flipping the coin, really. So what's the answer to that?
Michelle, you happy to hand this over to the portfolio holder who's sat next to you if you wish?
Oh, yes.
Oh, thanks. I'm taking this one for him, apparently. So obviously, again, it's going to come down to education. A lot of people aren't aware that, we as a borough council expect residents to put their bin out by 7 o'clock in the morning, because obviously our waste collections start early in the morning. That should happen either the night before or early in the morning. And again, it's a bit of education to residents to know what we would expect. In terms of enforcement, we haven't got a power apart from utilising the section 46, which would be bins being left out. So it might be, I think we'd have to take the tact of educating them. And then if it was a persistent issue, we might have to look at what we can do in terms of enforcement if they were continually being persistently putting the bins out and not taking the advice of officers.
Mate, I get confused myself because I see all these bins out 2 days before collection, or recycling, and I'm thinking, is it bin day? Due, John. And I'm thinking, is it bin day or is it recycling? So it can be a bit confusing for people like me.
Wielden.
A final point, and it's linked with what Councillor Barker's just said. On a few times in the area that I live, where people are ruthless about putting their bins out on time. We put our bins out like good little soldiers, and then the bins have sat there and sat there and sat there. On a Thursday is the day, and then come Friday, they still haven't been collected. And anybody who's gone off for the weekend on a Friday are then leaving their bins out all weekend because they deviated from the timetable. So I think whatever happens is going to have to be quite specific, but with some leeway for that sort of eventuality.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously this policy hasn't been solely dealt with by officers from my team, from the MMF team. It's a policy that's been designed in mind with our waste management team. Obviously, these are issues that they are dealing with on a daily basis in these areas. They're going regularly to these locations and seeing that bins have been left out, or there's now a massive accumulation where we've got a collection point and the bins have never been taken back to property. So now there's excess waste. So yes, I don't know whether Councillor Hutchinson would like to comment any further on that one.
I was thinking about it. I could comment that in people who live in the London areas and the sort of home counties, if their bin is out an hour before it should be or an hour after it shouldn't be, they're hit with a fine. And there's no ifs or buts. It's suck it and sit, get on with it. They're just fined.
Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to say the teams have had a few problems in this last week or two, and we have fallen behind on a few days. This has occurred through a combination of vehicle breakdowns and sickness. We appeared to have a stomach bug that was doing the rounds of some of the loaders and some of the drivers. We've recently appointed 6 new drivers, and we've also upgraded some of the loaders to be driver loaders. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility regarding the staff that we have. We're also looking at other agencies for supplying locum workers to be loaders and drivers. So that should help in any short-term shortages that we have. We had one truck this last week that needed a part. The part was ordered, but unfortunately they sent us the wrong part. So staff worked overtime on Saturday to try and catch up. The overtime was voluntary, so some staff said yes to the overtime and some staff said no. So we are hoping that we will pretty much be caught up by today or tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. I think the services is one thing, and what this report is a little bit different than that. Do any other members have any questions for Michelle on this? No raise of hands. I'll let Councillor Barker ask one more, followed by Councillor Williams, and then hopefully I will get to ask.
I'm sure Councillor Williams will be in agreement. Recycling. Sorry, Councillor Hutchinson. When the recycling is emptied, and Michelle's mentioned littering, I'm looking at Councillor Williams because I think he knows what I'm going to say. The mess they leave behind on the streets, private. If we are looking to find residents, we've got to make sure that all the mess is picked up. I watch them. I'm not knocking them. They do a splendid job, but I am in this case because I watch them. And when it goes on the floor, who picks that up? Who's answering my question?
I think it's me. No, it's all right. So obviously operatives should be collecting up any waste that's dropped on the floor. On top of that, obviously we have our street cleansing team who obviously do a sterling job in terms of our street cleansing regime. I think if members have concerns in regards to how operatives are conducting business, that needs to be raised directly with the head of service.
Sorry, Chair, my question's been answered.
Okay, John, you, no question? Okay. If there are no, right, okay. So if everybody else has asked their questions, I will ask mine. Michelle, regarding what you're planning to do, and when you're saying that there are certain hotspots areas, I could say for myself, probably Councillor Heason won't have terraced houses. I think every other member in this room in their ward has the same issue with the terraced houses. Now, so that opens it up to a bigger scale. And you're saying about putting like leaflets out to let people know about their due care and whatnot. Going back to Councillor Adcock with his scrap man. I mean, me personally, I think that the scrap metal dealers, they are in it and they will not fly tip it because they know that that is their job, that is their income. My question on that is, how long do residents have to put that scrap out? And if it hasn't been collected in, say, a week, are they going to be subject to coming under that sort of that fine or warnings and whatnot? Also, with you saying about leaflets, putting leaflets out for information, because a lot of residents won't know what they are doing and their due care, as other members have commented this evening. Is it something that would be better on the website and just put out, rather than getting a load of leaflets done for across the entire borough and then expecting like either yourselves, officers, members, any helpers to go out and leaflet? I've not got a problem with that. I'd be quite happy to do my ward of Westwood Park and Northwood just to give that information out. But in my particular ward, you don't see that a lot. Any comments?
Yeah, so the proposal would be in regards to the information will be put online. It would be the first point of call. So obviously if someone is ringing in to say, my neighbour's left their bin out for quite a substantial time, there'll be information and guidance there as to what we would expect. And this would be the contents of the information flyer. The flyers I would envisage will only be utilised in our hotspot locations where we've got a particular problem. It'll be used as an educational tool then, you know, to show that we've trying to educate residents. We've spoken to them about what we would expect. And then obviously, if we get non-compliance from that point, we would then look at escalating that through our enforcement procedures and look at what would be necessary. Again, just to emphasise that obviously I'm very conscious that not everybody has legitimate reasons or do have legitimate reasons as to why they aren't able to retrieve their bins, put their bins out for collection. And that's something that our officers will be mindful of. And we'll look at, you know, making the necessary referrals to make sure that's in place. So yes, the information will be made available for all residents. So this on the website, should they so wish to look for that information, but the flyers will be targeted in regards to our hotspot locations. And again, I would highly encourage member involvement in regards to having those open and frank conversations with residents as to what the council expect. And I take your point, Chair, that obviously some wards don't have those issues in regards to bins on streets, but all the wards in our borough have a number of issues in regards to fly tipping and duty of care offences. And there's a substantial amount of work that we need to do around educating our residents, you know, that person who's advertised their services on Facebook, who can quite cheaply take away your waste for £60, is probably likely going to dump it either, if not in Newcastle, in one of our neighbouring authorities. And that's definitely something that's happening across from the city and from Cheshire and from Stafford. And we're trying to work in partnership with all of our neighbouring authorities to ensure that we are consistent, and and take the same approach in regards to enforcement to really stamp down on this blight on our communities.
Yeah,
Chair, do you mind
agreed.
if I just come back and not everybody is online, aren't we? And also, there's an awful lot of people, if you've got a flyer, we stick it up on the fridge door, and it just gives us a gentle reminder of things, doesn't it? You know, when your bins are due, what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. There's an awful lot of people who are not going to go online every week, are they, just to check up if I'm doing everything right. And not everybody is online. I've got neighbours who aren't online, who rely on probably me and John for any advice or whatever. So I do think the leaflet is important. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, agreed, Councillor Joe Williams, but there will come a cost of quite a lot to the council, which is probably why Michelle is encouraging members to go out and put them leaflets out. Now, if I'm perfectly honest, without being disrespectful, there are members in this room who probably will find it physically difficult to go out, and it will take them a long time to go and put out in them hotspots areas. So which is why I raised the point about putting it online to save cost. This to me it looks like this is going to be not an overnight problem to solve. I think this is if I can recommend if this can come back at some point, whether it be the next meeting or later on in the year, just to see what progress we're making with this, if that's okay with you, Michelle.
Yes, absolutely. More than happy to obviously present the policy at a future meeting once it's actually been designed and drawn up, and obviously to report back to members as to how we're getting on, you know, the number of reports we've received in regards to these sort of offences, and the approaches we've taken as a local authority in terms of dealing with them.
Councillor Wright.
To remark that in Town Ward, we've got a huge number of student accommodation. And I think that the student at Keele University it's not working. Keele University needs to be advised of this, the people that sort out for students to live in the community, because a lot of them aren't very well behaved with regard to looking after the bins and things. So I think that's an important issue that needs to be added on. So.
Yes,
I don't know how long it's going to be till this is implemented anyway.
Yes, absolutely. And that is something we are conscious of. We've got very good links with Keele University, and they have stated that they are willing to get on board, you know, to do some of those door knocks on student properties to educate. And obviously a lot of the problem we get with regards to student accommodation is obviously we're getting students from all over the country, where recycling and domestic waste presentation schemes are substantially different to what we expect. So again, there's an element of education that we need to make sure we're delivering to the university students as well.
Sorry, can I just going on to the leaflets? I mean, the street I live in, we've got half the street that take the bins in and half that don't, and it's the bottom half that don't. Could it be that members actually ask for the leaflets just for certain streets? Because I live in a H of terraced houses, and it is bad in some of them, but others just take them all in. So I think it's up to the members to say, I could do with a couple of 100 leaflets. It doesn't have to leaflet the whole ward, because a lot of people have got front gardens and backyards and that and do take them in. But I think it's mainly in my ward, the terraced houses that have got very lazy, actually.
Yes, absolutely. And like I say, we're very keen to make sure we're doing this in partnership. This isn't a matter that's going to be resolved overnight. Conscious that these issues have been going on for a long time. And again, like I've said previously, we're looking at changing an attitude and a mindset to really encourage our residents to think about how the impacts that behaviour can have on the communities, and the benefits of, you know, of changing that behaviour and how that will improve the communities. So yes, there's a partnership approach we need to take in regards to addressing that, whether it be Keele University, whether it be members, whether it be Borough Council officers, basically anyone and everyone who wants to get involved. I'm more than happy to rope in.
Chair.
We're now getting quite a few other people who want to speak in. So firstly, when I said about doing the whole ward, what I meant was about duty of care. and like what people can, just as an educational point, and that's why I referred back. But I agree with Councillor Diamond. If there is certain bits, so many, say a couple hundred leaflets, whatever, then yeah, I'm going to go to Councillor Brown, followed by Councillor Heeson, followed by Councillor Wheeldon, and then back to Councillor John Williams, and then I'm going to sum up and we will move to the proposal.
Very much, Chair. I'm just going to echo really what Councillor Diamond is saying. And if you did want anyone to pilot it, for example, I could give you 3 or 4 streets by email that are very keen to get this going. And I'd hate any considerations of some of the practicalities to halt this, because I think it's such a positive move.
Yes, brilliant. I welcome any suggestions.
Councillor Heeson.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment, really. When we've got the bin, let's say the bins, when we've got the garden, the waste bins, they have a sticker on the bin. If you're going to have target areas, why don't we put stickers on bins? And then, it's not going to disappear. People will see them. We can also spread the word personally. And I think for houses of multiple occupation, it's not just students. We will have, if we don't have them already, asylum seekers, and they'll need to be educated as well.
Yes, thank you for that. So the stickers on bins is something that we are looking to introduce. And obviously I also take on your point around, other HMOs that we may have to deal with. It's education for everybody who lives within the borough, the residents, the temporary residents, the students. There's an education that needs to be met for everybody.
Councillor Wheeldon.
Just a comment. We've got a heck of a report, which is brilliant and thorough. That's developed a policy in line with other local authorities, which has also given us a strategy, which is what we're discussing now to sort of implement the report. I think one thing that you've got to do now is look at it slightly differently and come up with a marketing strategy for the content of that. And at the moment, we're sort of dabbling and putting a big toe in and not quite getting to having a full marketing strategy of implementing this so that everybody is aware of it. It's just a comment.
No, absolutely. That is something we are conscious of. It is something that we do need to do before we can make this live, shall we say. And it is something we're looking to replicate. Now, I know some of the members may have seen some of the campaigns that Stoke are recently pushing out via their socials. That is the sort of thing we're looking to replicate. And again, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's something that needs to be developed. And hard-hitting campaigns are very effective and have been very effective in other neighbouring authorities.
I mean, you could utilise some of, the big advertising boards. That's. I mean, you can't miss those, especially if it's opposite the bus station.
Councillor John Williams. If nobody else has got any more comments, we will move to the recommendations. Are members happy to approve in principle the review of this and support the implementation of section 46A EPA 1990?
Yes.
Okay, and we will pick this up later on in the year. We will move to item 9, which is public space protection orders, parks and open spaces. And this report is found on pages 43 to 60 of your agenda pack. Michelle, I thought the last one was not as good. I'm just going to hand it to you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Thank you, everybody. So this report is to update members with the results of the 6-week consultation and the recommendations in regards to that. And we are also looking for permission to conduct a further 6-week consultation in regards to the public space protection order for parks and open spaces. Now, just to remind members, this particular report is in regards to alcohol prohibition zones, as we're formerly known, and dog controls that are all encompassing in the public space protection order. I presented at the last meeting some statistics around alcohol prohibitions, around dog controls, and the measures that we've and the results of that. And on the back of that, members agreed for us to do a consultation with members of the public around their thoughts and feelings around what the proposals are. So just to reiterate what the proposals are, we're looking to replicate what we've previously had in regards to our dog controls, which is the means to pick up. We're looking at dog exclusions, dog on leads, and a maximum of 6 dogs. As part of this report, members will be able to see an appendix in regards to the dog on leads and the dog exclusion zones, which specifically relates to our play areas, our tennis courts, our skate parks, that sort of thing. Whereas the means to pick up is in relation to any park or open space owned by the Borough Council. So a full copy of the consultation results can be found attached to this report and on Appendix C. But the headline findings are as follows. There were only 22 responses to the initial consultation. And not all respondents answered each question. But on the whole, there was support for the proposals, with 100% of the respondents in agreement for continuing to require dog owners to clean up and have a means to pick up after their dog. Approximately 82% of residents were in favour of no more than 6 dogs in the named locations, with the lowest support seeming to be that a requirement to keep dogs on leads, and in particular in relation to Bathpool Park, where only 55% were actually in agreement, and on space owned by parish and town councils, again, 55% were in agreement with dogs being kept on leads in these locations. Some additional points to note as part of the consultation was that 2 respondents commented on the maximum of number of dogs, and that they should be lower than 6 than the proposal sets out. Obviously, as part of the consultation process, there's an opportunity for members to further amend these proposals that we're putting forward, which will then obviously be put out as part of the next 6 weeks of consultation. The recommendations at present are that the proposals remain the same as per Appendix A, and I'm happy to take any questions in regards to that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to get in first this time. On your list, what you've just described us is where you've got dog exclusion and dogs on leads. What about where dogs are allowed to be off the lead? I think that was one of the points made at the last meeting. There's nothing in the report that states where that can be happening. Could that be added to the report?
Yes, so obviously the report, the appendix that's part of the report where we're specifying the dog exclusion and the dog on leads, obviously specify the areas of land where those particular prohibitions relate. If an area of land is not listed on as part of that, it is because there is no requirement for dogs to be on leads or for dogs to be excluded from them areas. The purpose of the dogs on leads and the dog exclusion zones predominantly tend to be around the protection of the public, children, other vulnerable wildlife, and things like that are the things we need to consider around why we would put a dog exclusion or have a requirement for a dog to be on lead.
Yeah, I'll open it up. Anybody else like to come in? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Michelle. I welcome this. I find this particular problem in the ward where I live, which is different to the ward where I'm a councillor. That's Loggerheads. I live in Ashley. And I think in the semi-rural areas, there's a little bit of a culture of dogs really being allowed to sort of go around without leads. And there's not a particular attention to picking up their fouling. What I wanted to ask you about, and I know it's a tricky one, it's enforcement. When I lived in Stoke, a young lady came along with a dog, and right outside my gate, the dog defecated. So I challenged her, and she said she couldn't pick it up because she didn't have a bag. So I quickly gave her a bag because I've got a dog, and she did pick it up. But there isn't always somebody there, is there, to challenge somebody, and there isn't always somebody there who can provide those bags. And how can you stop somebody going out with a dog without bags? It seems a very difficult thing to enforce.
It is. It's an extremely challenging thing to enforce. Obviously, having someone there at the right time whilst that's happening, and the chances of a uniformed officer being present and someone then choosing not to pick up after their dog is highly unlikely if they know someone's there watching them. What I will say is, as part of the One Council process and the development of the mobile multifunction team, we are looking to immobilise and upskill and multi-skill a number of officers who will be able to do that enforcement around our public space protection orders, around littering, around fly tipping, and taking on all those environmental offences and looking at enforcing it. So it is something we're looking to develop, and I'm hoping to have a catalyst of officers who will be able to enforce the proposals.
Thank you. That sounds super. Could I just ask, would these be uniformed officers?
Yes, they would.
Councillor Jill Williams.
This is a question, actually. It's on the whammy, actually. Now, we've just listed out to the footballers, haven't we? We've got all the children on there, and that's absolutely great. Don't ask the boss, I totally agree. But we've got down in the report, you're allowed to take a dog on, but on a lead. Why can't we try? I know we're not going to do it 100%. Why can't we try and say it's a dog exclusion part of the field? I don't see the point in allowing little ones, because no matter how you try to pick up dog feces, you don't get all of it, do you? But we're allowing it on a football pitch, and it's a public football pitch in a way, isn't it? You know, even though we've listed it out. I just don't understand why we've done that. We could at least try and say, you know, exclude dogs. Thank you.
I think obviously the proposal that we've got, it's the same for a lot of our football pitches across the borough where we have a dog on lead requirement. It's not something we can't change if members felt strongly that we needed to take a different approach in regards to our rugby pitches, football pitches, and we have dog exclusions. But again, it'd be difficult in terms of enforcement. Obviously, if you were looking at excluding the dogs from that area, it would probably be defined by the lines of the football pitch. And obviously that's where we get sort of into a contentious sort of enforcement issue.
Sorry, Chair, I can understand that, but we could at least try, couldn't we? There's a lot of responsible dog owners out there, and I'm sure there is in this room, isn't there? Perhaps they would take note and not go on the football pitch. You know, so we could at least try, couldn't we?
Yes, absolutely. And if like I say, if members are in support of pushing through that, that we exclude dogs from indefinitely from football pitches or rugby pitches. What I will say is obviously I would envisage that we will get a high response of individuals who would not be in support of those proposals, but that's what our consultation's for.
Councillor John Williams.
Chairman, yeah, I agree with this particular item. Just on one point, I'll come back to that. But really, are we increasing, is the council increasing the enforcement officers? So that's just one point, really. If you, do you want me to ask I've got a series of questions for the officer. Right, on 1.5, page 44, on a PSPO, that you'll be talking to community representatives if you think it's appropriate. Now, does that include councillors? Because if there's a problem in councillors' wards, I think they should be told about it, and they hopefully will be able to help in the implementation of these policies. So that's the other one. On the some of the areas are, in my view, are missed off, and just one in particular is the mineral line. I can't see that on the mineral line. Runs from Crossheath right through to Silverhill and shoots off to Nutton and going into the Oldwich ward. Well, I've got a number of places that are missed off, and also some of the boundaries, Chair. I won't bore the committee with that detail. I'll speak to the officer after the meeting, or we can email where some of the areas are missed off in my particular ward. But really, could you, those two, the questions are the 1.5, will councillors be told it? Make that point anyway. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I've made a note of your questions, so I'll go through them as you've asked them. So are the council looking to increase their enforcement officers? So we've got a number of officers who have some form of enforcement type action, whether that be in regards to littering or environmental offences or even parking. Their skill set is very much the same in terms of undertaking enforcement actions. And what we're looking to do is upskill a number of the members of the team to allow them to be multifunctional, to allow us to put resource where it's required, and train our officers to be able to be undertake a number of multidisciplines. In regards to consulting community representatives, so again, members are welcome and advised to take part in the consultation process. I know a number of members already have. It also relates to kennelling clubs, kennelling charities. They have an opportunity there to have their say in regards to the proposals. And finally, you make reference to a number of locations being missed off the appendix. Now, the appendix that's attached, I'm hoping, is the right one, and it should show the areas listed are the ones where it relates to dog exclusion and dog on leave requirement only. The ones that aren't on there still have the means to pick up, and people and dog owners should be picking up after their dogs in those locations, but there's no requirement for a dog to be on a lead in those locations, or there's no proposal for dogs to be excluded from those locations. Does that make sense?
Important of cycling, walking and running, and it's and part of the park run. It's happening so the weekend, so it's to get everybody to be able to enjoy the open spaces, but people actually be responsible for their particular animals we're talking about, but also the actions of other people that are doing that. So I thought the mineral line was a really important piece of between Newcastle town centre, Silverdale and Notton and beyond. Thank you.
In answer to your question, actually, Councillor Brown, up in Lincolnshire, they have dog poo bag stations, and they put them on the gates to like footpaths and things, and there's just like a pack of dog poo bags that members of the public can just rip off and take, which I think is a really good idea and something perhaps we ought to consider. Seeing as we have no dogs in children's playgrounds, surely football pitches should come under the same sort of rules, I would have said, because it's children that are playing on them. And you wouldn't like it if your child come home covered in dog poo because it was in the goals and it had fell over. So I think we ought to consider something like that we do something about that. And also on the antisocial behaviour bit, a lot of the children's playgrounds get trashed at night, and there's never anybody about to police that, is there, in Kidsgrave? I mean, even the little parks, I mean, there's one just up the road from me and it's tucked away. Not many people know it's there, but these children know it's there. And they quite regularly melt the swings on there and different things. And nobody seems to go out and check these things or clean them up.
Yes, thank you for that. So first point around the dog exclusion, again, if members if there's quite a strong opinion that we should consider dogs to be excluded from football pitches and rugby pitches, then that is for members to consider, and if that's something they wish to consult on as part of the next part of the consultation process, then it might be useful to get residents' feedback in regards to those proposals. Your next comment around the antisocial behaviour, take your point that obviously a lot of these incidents in regards to ASB happen overnight. That's not unusual. That's obviously when the lights go, when the sun goes down, we have this increase in antisocial behaviour. You'll be aware that as of last year, there's a new policing structure that came in place, and I'm currently running out some training for all the response teams and the neighbourhood policing officers in regards to how to effectively breach a public space protection order. So all officers, whether they be from the response team or from the neighbourhood policing team, will have relevant training in regards to the fixed penalties for a breach of the PSPO. And that's any PSPO. That can be for the town centre PSPO, or it can be for the parks and open spaces. So again, it's not single-handedly being enforced by Borough Council staff, although I would set a precedence that for the parks and open spaces one, that will be quite heavily weighted by and enforced by Borough Council staff. But again, there will be an opportunity when should officers from the local policing team respond to any incidents of antisocial behaviour in our parks and open spaces and find that a public space protection order isn't being complied with, then there's an enforcement tool for them to utilise that.
We'll go with Councillor Adcock and then I will come in.
Thank you. I think overall, it's a decent compromise in that we're saying to dog owners, you can let your dog off the lead and exercise and throw the ball and all that, but you can't have your dog in the enclosed children's play areas like the one near me at Ilkley Place, or the on the leads in the football pitches, or in the nature reserves like at Apedale. I think those are all sensible. There's loads of other places that you can have your dog off the lead, anywhere that's not listed on here, essentially, provided you're a responsible owner. My question's about the one that only had 52% in favour of, about the open spaces owned by parish and town councils. I think possibly that's 52% because it's slightly vague. Is there a way, if this goes to further consultation, we can be a bit more specific about what that actually means in terms of what kind of open space is owned by parish and town councils? Because I'm trying to think of an example of one. And I think for a lot of residents who are consulting, it might be quite vague and thinking, does this mean all open spaces? Is there a way of making it clearer what that actually means to the public? Thank you.
Yes, noted. We'll try and drill down and make sure that that's more clear to residents as part of the next part of the consultation.
Yes, I respect the report. I think it's very well planned. There will be a lot of negativity out there. The question I've got is how much are we going to put into this for it to be policed? Because I can guarantee some of the places I've just read, like Lyme Valley ball games pitch, I see that daily when I take my dog down. The dogs are running around fetching balls. They are not on leads. And my personal opinion is I think it's good exercise for the dog, providing the people pick up after them. That's where that issue comes in. There'd be a lot more people that would pick up if there would be a lot more bins within a certain walking distance. Bins are only located where the guys in their vehicles can get to it. If they can't drive down anywhere, there's no bins. But again, I spoke with our former officer Dave Adams in the past about this, and it comes into budget. Any thoughts from you on that, Michelle?
Yeah, so like I say, obviously the enforcement is something we're looking to roll out, and obviously we will initially target our hotspot locations, and we do have hotspot locations in regards to dog fouling and breach of the previous order, and that's where we will initially deploy some of the resource around the enforcement. And again, it comes back, and I feel like I've bandied this around quite a lot this evening. But there's a substantial amount of education that needs to go and coincide with such an order. There's been quite a lot of public upset around not being aware of what the conditions are. We've had incidences that have involved high profile individuals in the communities who haven't been complying with an order, and there's a substantial amount of education that needs to coincide with any introduction of an order. And again, there'll be an element of advising residents when they're out and about? Are you aware that there's an order in place in this location, putting it in notice boards? I've done a lot of work with the consultation, posting it into all of the individual community chat groups, to really spread the word that we're looking at these proposals and give people an opportunity to consult on the proposals. So there's a lot of work we need to do. We'll also link in with all residents groups, and advise them of what's happening, if we're doing any ad hoc patrols, and welcome members' thoughts if they've got anywhere that they would like officers to particularly patrol. I can't remember if he asked me any more questions other than that.
Councillor Whelan, please.
This is the point where I say I mourn the loss of the dog licence, because that small fee coming in would pay for what Councillor, I can't remember the second name, Burnett Faulkner, sorry, said about the little bags, that there's a payment there that would contra, and it would be a sensible thing, because it should be something that as far as possible is self-funding. So I do mourn the loss, and I have a dog and we've always had dogs. And I'd quite happily pay for a little license, and it makes the owners then more traceable, and you can track them and you can see the names of people who are ne'er-do-wells and who've done wrong, and also the good people who want a pat on the back.
I think I'd be going down the route of Old Yeller if the licence fee was to come back. Councillor John Williams, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. To answer your question about dog waste bins, it's a policy of the council not to put any more dog bins anywhere. They will replace them, they will move them to different areas, but they will not add to the number of dog bins. That is a policy of the council. Could I just, little one, and I probably know the answer, does it include county council land, or did you think that is private, or does it include county council land, county owned land? Sorry,
it includes Apedale Country Park, as that's an area of land that the county specifically wanted involved in this proposal. So your other smaller areas of county council land, it wouldn't refer to. No.
A lot of people like doing our new trying to get planning permission for that is used now as a regular drinking for women's Saturday and Sunday, Friday and Saturday. So it's being used, and again, it's the county council's responsibility, all the schools' responsibility, not the Borough Council's. Thank you. Just clarify that. Thank you.
The bins and whatnot. Dog bins are now obsolete. They are replacing them with normal multi-purpose waste. But like you said, John, the fact that they will not bring in new bins, but that is my argument, is the fact that why people won't pick up, or they'll just like the bag on a tree is a nice feature. Councillor Diamond, please.
Thank you for that image. It gets a lot of that down along the canals. My thing is at Clough Park, there is as far as I'm aware, a prohibition, and always been a prohibition on that park for drinking. Is that true? Because I've always said there is a prohibition when I see the ne'er-do-wells walking through the cans and all this, that and the other. But I do a litter pick every Sunday morning with the volunteers before the junior park run, and the rubbish in that park is beyond belief. The drinking that's going on in there, the bottles, the cans, and other things I really won't mention. There needs to be some really, really heavy policing of these kind of areas, like the same in Chester Road at Torp Pits. The open spaces, they're open, and the complaints I'm getting of the members of the public, because I know where they're getting the drink from, so I've involved the police and all that, and we shouldn't have to keep doing this every single week. And I can't tell you the rubbish that we collect every Sunday morning, and most of it is alcohol related.
Yes, thank you for that. So in regards to Clough, there isn't an alcohol prohibition zone. alcohol prohibition zones actually ceased and the legislation changed in 2014. So unless you had a public space protection order in place, there was the alcohol prohibition zone actually went away. So this proposal sees the reintroduction of what we would formerly know as the alcohol prohibition zones in our parks and open spaces. I am aware that we have had problems in the Clough Park area, as you've mentioned, around antisocial behaviour. But what I would also do is ask you if you can remind residents to report in incidences, because we don't have a reflection of the problems that we know are happening there. And therefore, obviously, to resource it from a local policing team side of things, unless they're getting the calls to service, it doesn't mean it won't take a precedence in regards to, you know, deploying officers to that location. And it's just also for information purposes for you, Councillor Diamond, that we are looking to do some workshops utilising the Clough Pavilion to help to deal with some of the antisocial behaviour in that park over the summer holidays.
That because I'm going to try and get that pavilion open for the last 3 years. That'd be great. Thank you.
Questions for Michelle? No? Okay. I will just ask one final thing. Oh, so Michelle, will you be looking to take heed on what members have pointed out in this section, and I know it's ongoing, but will it be tweaked at all? Or is this, you're just going to run with this consultation as the report set out?
So if members are welcome, I'll look at the proposals that members have suggested, and I'm happy to, if members are happy, I'm happy to look at that and roll out what we've currently said. And if we need to tweak in terms of areas, I'm happy to discuss that with members in regards to their particular localities.
Members happy with that? Yeah. Okay, so we'll move to the recommendations anyway. So are members happy to approve what's been said tonight? Councillor Jill Williams, before we come in.
I still don't agree with 6 dogs on leave, and I'll never agree to that. So I'm sorry. The rest of the report, I'm fine with.
Okay.
I don't agree with.
Are we required a vote, or members wish to vote, or should we just put this through? I mean, we noted Councillor Jill Williams. Yep. Okay, we will note it and we will move on, and we'll get back with this later on in the year when the consultation is over. Item 10 is the minutes of the Public Protection Subcommittee meetings. These minutes can be found on pages 61 to 62 of the agenda. Are members content with those as a correct record? Okay. Item 11 is urgent business. I've not been made aware of any urgent business. And item 12 is disclosure of exempt information, which there is nothing to declare on that. So as for that, I declare this meeting has come to an end. The next meeting will be held on Tuesday, the 5th of September. All that's left to say is enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good night.